Hello dear viewer, welcome to this lesson. We are going to be discussing primary 7 work, and this is going to be our first lesson in primary 7 class. Welcome to P7. Now in this class we are going to begin by looking at the first lesson, that is location of Africa on the world map. Now in the previous classes, like in primary 6, we were looking at East Africa. In primary 5, we were looking at Uganda, and we were able to locate Uganda from Africa. Today we are locating Africa itself from the whole world, meaning in the world, where do we find Africa? That is what we are going to be discussing. Now, we are going to be following our workbooks, and from our workbooks, we are going to be discussing from pages 1 to 11. That is where we are going to be discussing from. Now, as we begin with this lesson, we need to have the definitions that we have written on the board here. The first definition is, we have the definition of the word location. The word is location. Now, like I said in the previous classes, you still talked about location. We are not going to change the definition. It's going to remain the same. So, location can have two definitions. One, we can say location refers to a position or a place where something is found. That is definition number 1. A position or a place where something is found. Meaning, where is it found? That is now what we call location. A place where something is found. Then the second one is, we are going to look at location as a process or a way of finding where something is, a place of finding something. A way or a method of finding something, which means you are looking for something. That is another definition for location. A way of locating something or a place. That is the second definition for the term location. Now, in this, we are going to say that Africa is one of the continents that make up the world. Africa is one of the continents that make up the world. But we need to first understand, what do we mean by a continent? We are saying Africa is one of the continents, but what is a continent? We must be able to know that. So in the simple understanding, we are going to say that a continent is a large mass of land surrounded by water. A large mass of land which is surrounded by water. Which means we are going to be looking at our Africa. For example, if we are having this as our map of Africa, we shall be able to find that this continent, this is a large mass of land, and it is surrounded by water. This is what we call a continent. So we are having our Africa there. That is what we call a continent. A large mass of land surrounded by water. Which means that, like we have said, Africa is surrounded by water. When we look at also other continents, we shall also see the same. They are surrounded by water. Next, we are going to understand that how were continents formed. Because we have, at the beginning, we had land together, then we had water together, even when we follow the story of creation. And we are going to have these continents forming coming into existence as a process that we call continental drifting. Continental drifting. Therefore, continental drifting refers to the movement, we can call it the relative movement of continents to and away from each other. That is how we can define continental drifting. The relative movement of continents to and away from each other. Of course, we are saying this is the process which led to the formation of continents. In case you are asked, how were continents formed? Continents were formed as a result of continental drifting. And we have said continental drifting refers to the relative movement of continents to and away from each other. Let's continue with our lesson. We have the examples of continents that we have in the world. Like I said, Africa is one of them. Therefore, we are going to look at the continents and then the sizes. How large, how big is this continent? And we are having that, the size in square kilometers. Now, we need to follow the sizes of these continents. That's why we have summarized the continents here on the board with their sizes. The first and the largest is Asia. So we have a continent called Asia. We need to know that Asia is the largest continent in the world, covering 43,608,000 square kilometers. Remember, these digits are in square kilometers. That is Asia. Then when we go to Africa, which is our second largest continent, the second largest continent in the world is ours, that we call Africa. Africa covers 30,335,000 square kilometers. That is how large Africa is. 30,335,000 square kilometers. This is ours. I am underlining it so that you can easily understand. Next, according to our continents, as in their arrangements, we are having North America, which covers 25,349 square kilometers. 25,349,000 square kilometers. Then we come next to South America. That follows North America, covering an area of 17,611,000 square kilometers. Like I say, this we have already put the square kilometers here, so we can't again be putting here. But for you now, when you are writing them, you write and you put there the square kilometer unit, yes. Then we go to Antarctica. We have a continent that we call Antarctica. Now, Antarctica is that continent which is not inhabited, which is not occupied by people. If you are asked that question, name the continent which is not good for human settlement, you will find that this one does not have people living in it. And the reason is its temperatures are too cold. It's too cold to support human life. So people do not live here. That is about Antarctica. Let's look at the coverage. That is how large it is. Antarctica covers 13,340,000 square kilometers. That is Antarctica. Then next we go to a continent that we call Europe. Europe is the second last that we are having in our list. It covers 10,498,000 square kilometers of land. And finally, we have Australia as our seventh and last continent, which is the smallest. According to our list here, we have Australia as our smallest continent, covering 7,682,000 square kilometers. So these are the continents that we have and their sizes in square kilometers. Now, let's come back and we look at the continent that we are saying, that is Africa. Remember, in this topic, we are mainly going to talk about Africa, but we had gone also to talk about others because they are also other continents. We cannot only talk about Africa, we also need to talk about other continents. Now, in your previous class, that is primary 6, you must have learned that when you were learning about the explorers, you must have known, or you must have learned with your teacher, that the Europeans, those are the people from Europe, had feared Africa. I mean, they had referred to Africa as a dark continent. They had called Africa a dark continent. I want you to remember this. If you forgot it, then I want you to remember it now. The Europeans had termed Africa as a dark continent. Most of the children make mistakes. When they see dark, automatically they run to the dark skin of the Africans, which will make you to get a very big cross, meaning you will not get a mark. Here we are not looking at the skin color. We are looking at these Europeans did not know what was happening in its interior. And when we talk about the interior, we mean in the inside part of it. The Europeans did not know. Remember, when we look at the continents, we find that Europe is up here. So these people did not know what was happening in Africa. That is the reason as to why they called Africa a dark continent. So your teacher must have told you that the Europeans knew little about its interior, or they did not know what was taking place in the interior of Africa. Now, we are going to look at our next subheading. Reasons why the Europeans took long to come or to enter the interior of Africa. Of course, we need to note that when they didn't know what was happening, but they wanted to know, they wanted to find out what happens in Africa. But it again took them some good time for them to penetrate or to come to Africa. Those are the reasons we are going to be looking at. What delayed them, or what made them to come, to take long to come to Africa as a continent. Reason number one, we are saying the Europeans feared the hot deserts in Africa. Remember, Africa has got very many deserts. We have the Sahara Desert, we have the Namib Desert, we have the Kalahari Desert. So all those deserts are very hot, more so the Sahara Desert. So these Europeans feared, they thought maybe if they came to Africa, these deserts could maybe boil their skin and they could also become black, or they could just melt them. So they feared to come to Africa because of that, because of fearing the hot deserts that were in Africa. We have given an example, the Sahara Desert, that will take us the hottest in Africa. 2, the Europeans feared to cross the thick forests that were in Africa. They feared to cross the thick forests. Of course, if a thick forest is in an area, then you can also fear, even if it's you, where do you begin from? Because you never know, when you enter the forest in the middle there, you might end up getting lost or being eaten by these animals which are there. So they feared because of that. 3, the Europeans feared the hostile tribes that were in the interior of Africa. And when we talk about the hostile tribes, we look at the tribes which were not friendly to them. They could not tolerate other races or other people passing via their communities. And we have given an example, the Nandi, and we have the Maasai in Kenya. So those are the tribes that they feared to pass via their areas. And as a result, these Europeans took long. Next is number 4. The Europeans feared the fierce wild animals. Fierce wild animals. Or we can simply say they feared the dangerous wild animals which were in Africa. For example, we have the lions. In most of the game parks in Africa, you will find that we have these dangerous animals that can eat people, that can kill people. So it is also another reason that made them to fear, thereby taking long to come to the interior or to enter the interior of Africa. And then lastly, we are saying that there were no clear routes for them to follow, meaning there were no clear roads where they could pass to come to Africa. So because of these reasons, these Europeans took long to enter the interior of Africa. In our next discussion, we are going to look at why Africa is unique from the rest of the world continents. That is what we are going to look at. Why is Africa different from other continents? Of course, we need to note that Africa is a blessed continent. It has what is not in other continents. We are going to look at these things. Number one, the blessing that Africa has is Africa has the largest number or the highest number of the dark-skinned people, the blacks. That is what makes Africa to be unique. That is the pride for Africa. It is that continent with the highest number of the dark-skinned people. So that is the first thing that makes us in Africa to be unique from other worldly continents. There is no other worldly continent with the highest number of black people than Africa. That is number one. Then we got the second one. We shall find that Africa has got the shortest people in the world. These people are the ones that we call the pygmies. They are very short people. You find someone is an adult, a big person, but very short. So these are the people we call the pygmies. These people are mainly found in the central part of Africa. But some of them are in DRC, others are in Congo. That is Congo Brazzaville. That is where we find these people. And others are in the Central African Republic. All that is what we call Central Africa. Then the other one is, what makes Africa unique is that it is that continent which is crossed by the 3 major lines of latitude. Now, when we were in primary 5, primary 6, we learned about these lines of latitude. You will find that we say that the major latitude, which even happens to cross Uganda as our country, is the equator. But alongside the equator, we also have other lines of latitude which are very important. That is when we talked about lines of Tropic of Cancer and then the Tropic of Capricorn. We shall be looking at that in our next discussion. Then the next one is Africa has got the longest river in the world. Africa has got the longest river in the world. That is a very big blessing to our country, to our continent, Africa. No any other world continent has got this. And this river is the one we call River Nile. The longest river in the world is in Africa. That is what makes Africa to be unique from other worldly continents. And it makes us in Uganda to be proud that this river has its source in our country. That is Lake Victoria. So we need also to be aware of that. It is in Africa. Next, we are going to be looking at, we have another one which is saying that Africa has got the highest number of island countries. Africa has the largest number of island countries. Remember, an island country is that country which is surrounded by water. It is in a water body. So we shall be looking at those island countries when the time comes. That is in the next discussion, the next lesson. Next one is Africa has got the highest number of landlocked countries. Apart from island countries, Africa also has got landlocked countries. Now, what do we mean by landlocked countries? Landlocked countries, as you learned this in primary 5 class, these are countries which do not border a sea. Or you simply say these are countries which do not have seaports. They do not have direct access to the sea. That is, those are the landlocked countries, and there are very many in Africa. Next one is Africa has got the hottest desert in the world, and like we said, Sahara is that desert. That is the hottest desert in the world. And when we were looking at the reasons that delayed these Europeans to enter the interior of Africa, was that they had feared these hot deserts. So we are having that as our pride as Africans. We have the hottest desert in the whole world. And this makes Africa to be the hottest continent. Of course, you can also be asked, which is the hottest continent in the world? Because of this hottest Sahara Desert, we now take Africa as the hottest desert in the world. I mean, Africa as the hottest continent in the world. Then the next one is, Africa is found in the center of other world continents. When we look at the other continents, you will find that Africa is in the middle. That is also another advantage or another thing that makes Africa unique. Then lastly, we are saying that Africa has got the longest canal. Africa has got the longest canal, and that is the canal that we have written as the Suez Canal. The Suez Canal, that is Africa. So these are the reasons that make Africa to be a unique continent, to be different from the rest of other world continents. So, like we said, that Africa is found in the center of other world continents. We are now going to look at how do we locate Africa, ways of locating Africa. Now, when we are going to locate Africa, like we say, location can mean where something is found, or a process of finding the position of something. Now, we are going to be locating Africa using the following ways. Number one, we are going to locate Africa using the neighboring continents, meaning which other continents neighbor Africa or border Africa. Of course, we need to understand that when we are looking at continents bordering each other, we don't mean that where the other one ends is exactly where another starts from, as we are locating these other countries on the same continent. No. Here we shall find that there is a water body first separating, as we understood at the beginning of our lesson. A continent is that large mass of land surrounded by water. So we shall first have a water body, then we shall have the continent. Now that is what we are having here on the board. We have summarized by having continents on one side, then the direction to which these continents border Africa. First continent is Europe. And we are saying Europe is found north of Africa. North of Africa. Next is North America, and then we have South America. Both continents are found in the western part of Africa. Or we say they border Africa in the western direction. Then to the east we have two. We have Asia and Australia. That is in the east. Then lastly, in the south of Africa, down there, we shall be seeing on the map that Antarctica is found in the south of Africa. So these are the neighboring continents to Africa. So it means we can locate Africa by using the neighboring continents. Which continents neighbor Africa? We have said in the north we have Europe, in the west we have North and South America, in the east we are having Asia and Australia, then in the south we are having Antarctica. Which means if we are able to know where those other continents are, then we can automatically now be able to find that Africa now is in the center of those other continents. Next is we can locate Africa using neighboring water bodies. Using neighboring water bodies. Just like we said at the beginning, a continent, and I will not get tired of telling you that, a continent is a large mass of land surrounded by water, or by water bodies. You can also say like that. Which means Africa is located in, or is surrounded by very many water bodies, as we are going to be looking at them. The first water body we have is the Mediterranean Sea. Mediterranean Sea. I want you to take serious note of the spelling. Mediterranean Sea. It is bordering Africa in the north. That is where we find the Mediterranean Sea. It separates Africa from Europe, remember we said Europe is that continent that borders Africa in the north. So before Europe, we have that Mediterranean Sea separating. Then we have in the east, we have the Indian Ocean. Indian Ocean, it is found on the eastern side of Africa. Then in the west, we have the Atlantic Ocean. Atlantic Ocean, it is in the west. And finally, we have the Red Sea, together with the Suez Canal, that we say it's the longest canal in Africa, making Africa to be unique also. Those ones are found in the northeastern part of Africa, or they border Africa in the northeastern part. That is also what we need to understand about that. Then the other method is we can locate Africa using the lines of latitude and the longitude. I want you to understand here very well. Locating Africa using lines of latitude and longitude. Here we are going to understand these terms that we have talked about. That's why I have written definitions. I've abbreviated it in short. Now in our definitions, we are going to understand the following terms. We have talked of lines of latitude, lines of longitude. This is not something new to you. We are just going through this as a revision. Remember, these lines of latitude, lines of longitude, we can also call them latitudes. That is how we can call these lines of latitude. We can call them latitudes. And then the lines of longitude, we can also call them longitudes. I am emphasizing S in those words. Now, here we are looking at them one by one, and we are beginning with what we call latitudes. Like I said, we can call these lines of latitude. You need to get that properly. Now, what are lines of latitude, or what are latitudes? Latitudes are imaginary lines drawn on a map from east to west. We call them imaginary because they cannot be seen physically by our eyes. So that's why we call them like that. Now we need to note that on our diagram that we are having here, we are going to illustrate these lines that we call lines of latitude from east to west, or west to east, whichever. Now, right away from our downer classes, we understood that the world, or on the globe, we shall be having, like we have the globe, and then we have the first line. If we were to have it like that, the first line divides this globe into two equal halves. I want you to get that. Which means that if this was the globe, we are having it now divided in the center by this line that we call the equator. This is equator. Now, this equator has divided this globe into two halves, as I said. This is one half, this is another half. So we need to note that we have names, we have a name given to each of these halves. I believe you still know it. Fine. If you have forgotten, each half here is given the name hemisphere. Hemisphere. Which means even this one is another hemisphere. But there is also something we need to note, in that once this one is divided like this, of course this is now the equator, which means up here, this is now in the north of the equator. And this side here is in the south of the equator. Which means we shall now rebaptize this hemisphere according to the direction it is from the equator. If this one is in the north of the equator, then we can call this the northern hemisphere. We can now call this one the northern hemisphere. I mean this one here, this half. It is now the one we have called the northern hemisphere. Then remember, we said that even this other half is also called a hemisphere. But now, since it is in the southern part of the equator, we shall now call it the southern hemisphere. That is what we need to note as we are continuing understanding our lesson. The lesson is very, very simple because we are just revising what we learned in the previous classes. Now, apart from this line, equator, we also have other lines. We are also going to have other lines, which means if you were to rub this that we have put, we had this one here, and now we are removing also this because we have already understood what those ones were meaning. So we also need to note that we have other important lines of latitude. Remember, all these are latitude, which are also crossing Africa. These lines cross Africa. We talked about this, as in what makes Africa to be unique from other continents. We said Africa is crossed by the 3 major lines of latitude. We have already understood equator. Here we are going to have another latitude which is marked 23.5 degrees. Also here 23.5 degrees. Now still we are going to follow what we call latitude. Latitude, if we are to define it in simple terms, latitude, it is not latitudes. You need to know the difference between latitude and latitudes. When we are looking at latitude, we are meaning the distance of a place from the equator, either north or south. That is what we mean by latitude. The distance of a place from equator, either north or south. Now, let us remove this because we are understanding these other lines. We have said these lines are numbered 23.5 each, which means we begin counting from here. The equator is the starting line. From here we shall be having line 1, line 2, line 3, up to the time we reach 23.5 degrees. And because this is in the south, we shall put S to mean south of the what? Of the equator. This is, still we shall be having these lines numbered also from the north now. 1, 2, 3, up the time we reach the 23.5 degree line. This is also the one now we call, we put letter N to show that it is in the north of the equator. Let's name these lines. This one is the one we call the Tropic of Cancer. Tropic of Cancer. Then this one, we call this the Tropic of Capricorn. I want you to take serious note of the spelling Capricorn and Cancer. So these are the other lines, the other 2 important lines apart from the equator that are crossing where? Africa. Lastly, as I finish up with the equator, we also need to note that these lines cannot be written, instead of someone writing 23.5, someone can decide to write 23.5. That half stands for 0.5 degree or degrees south. Even this one, someone can dodge to write 23.5 and says 23.5 degrees where? North. It is the same. 23.5 is the same as 23.5. We need to be aware of this. Let's continue. We have said the equator is marked 0 degrees. Why? This is the starting line. It means it is the line where other lines are measured. So we begin from equator, like I said. If we are going to the northern part, we shall have line 1 degree, 2 degrees, till we reach the last part. That's now where we have the 90th degree. And also the same applies here. Now, one thing we need to note is that when we look at these lines, you will find that these lines are parallel to each other, meaning they do not meet. And for that reason, we can also call these lines of latitude parallels. parallels. We can also call them parallels. Then we come to the importance. How is the equator important? Now the equator determines the climate of an area. The equator determines the climate of an area. Number two, the equator determines the latitude. We have said it determines the distance of a place, whether north or south. That's what we call latitude. Then the other one is it can be used to locate places on a map. That is the method that we call grid reference, as we looked at it. Now, also we have terms. We have equinox. We have equinox that we are going to define. We are saying equinox is the period in a year when the sun is overhead the equator. Meaning when the sun is overhead the equator, that is what we call equinox. It makes the days and nights to be equal length. Here we are giving the month or the dates in a year when equinox takes place. You find that it happens on 21st March and 23rd September every year. That is the time when we experience what we call equinox. As I say, when the sun is overhead the equator. So that is about the latitudes. Now let's go also and look at the longitudes. Let's look at the longitudes. As we said at the beginning, instead of one saying longitudes, one can say lines of longitude. So we are simply also defining them. The very way we define the other one, except the directions now. So here we are saying lines of longitude or longitudes are the imaginary lines drawn on a map from north to south. And we are having a diagram which is illustrating these lines of longitude. We are having the major line also dividing this world, this globe, into two halves, and we said each half is called hemisphere. Now I want you to take note of this. Now this one, it is now going to, because this one is from north to south, it's going to have two hemispheres. Not again northern and southern. This time now we shall have the eastern hemisphere, and this side we shall have the western hemisphere. Don't say that everything is about northern hemisphere, southern hemisphere. No, the other one was for equator. This one now is for the major longitude marked 0 degrees that we call the Greenwich meridian or the prime meridian. One thing we also need to notice that this line is given the name Greenwich because it passes a town which is called Greenwich. That is in London. So we are crossing this. We are removing this so that we shall be able to see our line properly. Now, in Africa, this line crosses a city, that is Accra. It is the capital city of Ghana. That's why I have put a note here for you to understand well. They will be asking you, name the only city in Africa crossed by the Greenwich. That is Accra. That is the city. And I'll say it is the capital city of Ghana. Lastly, before we continue, we also need to note that we also have other lines. But the only thing is that these ones, what we shall see is that these lines join from north to south, and at the end of it all, we shall be able to come up with a diagram of this nature, which means that these ones meet. That is the difference that we have between the lines of latitude and the lines of longitudes. The other ones of latitudes, they are parallel to each other, meaning they do not meet. Whereas these ones of longitude, at least we are seeing them meeting at the South Pole here, and we are having also another meeting at the North Pole. So that is how we can represent the other lines of longitude. So still in these lines of longitude, we also have what we call solstice. Solstice. This is the period in the year when the sun is overhead the tropics, And when we talk about tropics, still we come back to the Tropic of Cancer and the Tropic of Capricorn. We call that period solstice period. We have two types. We have the summer solstice, then we have the winter solstice. In the summer solstice, we have the sun overhead at Tropic of Cancer, and during the winter solstice, the sun is overhead at Tropic of Capricorn. This is what we can share in this lesson. I must thank you for having participated in this lesson. I believe you have been enjoying it and you have understood it properly. Where you have not understood it, please feel free to contact me. The numbers are always there. You call me, then we shall be able to make you understand somewhere where you have not understood it well. Thank you for being part of my lesson. I wish you the best.